It was one of those slow, hushed afternoons where the village felt half asleep, and even the wind moved like it had nowhere to be. I was lounging near the hearth fiddling with the edge of a parchment when I noticed a sealed letter I'd forgotten to open. It was from Liam. He'd left his training sash at my place the night before after we sparred with wooden swords in the yard, and now he needed it back. Didn't seem like much, so I rolled the sash, tied it with twine, and decided I'd ride over. Liam's cottage wasn't far, just a brief ride past the eastern ridge and across the river bend. I knew his mother, Lady Charlotte, was often home, but she mostly kept to herself, usually tucked away behind the thick oak doors of her study. I'd never paid her much mind beyond the passing thought that for a woman her age she carried herself with a quiet beauty. She was likely in her early 40s, though you'd never guess it by her face. Still, to me, she was always just Liam's mother. That was it. Nothing more. So, when I knocked on the carved wooden door, I expected Liam to answer, but instead it was her. She opened the door wearing nothing but a wrap of drying linen, her hair still damp, hanging in dark curls over bare shoulders. She looked a little surprised, but not ashamed in the slightest. I looked away, fast not sure where else to fix my eyes, the awkwardness in the air heavy enough to hang like mist. "Ah, Russell," she said, offering a calm smile. "Liam's gone to the market, won't be back for a while. What brings you by?" I stumbled for a moment, then held up the rolled sash like a peace token. "Just returning this, he left it after training. Didn't know you'd be indisposed." She chuckled gently, brushing a wet strand behind her ear. "Oh, I've only just bathed, nothing more. You may come in if you'd like." I hesitated just for a beat, but stepped inside. She wasn't a stranger after all. Still, something felt different now. I'd always seen her as this composed, noble presence, not someone I'd ever felt drawn to. We sat in the receiving room. She offered me a cup of warm cider, which I accepted. At first, the talk was light, simple, but the longer we sat, the more I noticed her speaking with a kind of honesty I hadn't expected. She talked of change, how the world shifted around her, how even in a house full of voices she often felt alone. For a short while, it didn't feel like I was speaking to my best friend's mother at all. It was just her and me, having a quiet, real moment. And the way she looked at me, she was really looking, listening, caring. That was when something in me shifted. I began to see her differently. There was more to her than just Liam's mother. She smiled again, soft, wistful, almost amused. "You've grown so much, Russell," she said. "Hard to believe. I still remember you and Liam running through this house with wooden swords chasing shadows." I didn't know what to say to that. I just nodded, feeling something unfamiliar stir in the space between us. There was an energy now, unspoken, but undeniably there. She rose, walking into the kitchen to fetch more cider. I followed behind. As she passed me, the faint scent of rosewater and lavender lingered in the air. Fresh from her bath, it clung to the air softly. And in that moment, she didn't feel like Liam's mother anymore. She was simply a woman, a soul with her own story, her own needs. "Thank you for bringing it," she said, turning toward me with a small, honest smile. I didn't realize how much I needed company today. I returned her smile, something warm settling in my chest. Any time. But even as I stepped out into the fading light, I knew something had changed. Something wordless had taken root. And I had no idea where it might lead. But beneath it all, there was a hum, quiet, steady of something more. A kind of tension that didn't shout, but whispered loud enough if you stood still. Little glances, quiet smiles, shifts of breath between sentences. And then, without warning, she asked, "Are you free this eve?" She said it so casually, like it was nothing more than passing thought. But I knew better. There was weight beneath the words. I suppose not much, I replied with a shrug. Wasn't planning to do anything. Her smile curved just slightly thoughtful. "Liam is off to the tavern with his companions tonight. I thought I might prepare supper. You should come." She said it plainly, as if inviting a neighbor for bread, but something about her voice made it hard to decline. Before I could second-guess myself, I heard the words leave my mouth. All right, I'd like that. And just like that, it was decided. I had no idea what I was stepping into. Later that evening, I rode back through the village as dusk fell, the wind cool on my neck, my chest tight with something I couldn't name. A buzzing sense of unknown, as if I were walking through fog toward something I wouldn't understand until it was too close. When I reached her cottage, it was just as I remembered, simple, warm, stone-walled, with ivy growing thick across the edges. Inside it smelled of roasted root vegetables, fresh herbs, and firewood. Lady Charlotte was in the kitchen, humming softly to herself as she stirred a pot over the hearth. I lingered in the doorway a moment, just watching. And that's when it struck me. This woman, standing before me, she didn't feel like the Charlotte I used to know. She moved with ease, with comfort in her space, like she was entirely at home in her own skin. More real, somehow. More open. Go on, have a seat, she said over her shoulder. Supper is nearly done. I sat down, doing my best not to look nervous, though my heart was moving faster than I wanted to admit. She floated through that room like it belonged to her completely. And me, I sat there quietly trying to make sense of the storm inside me. It wasn't just her presence. It was how she made me feel like I wasn't just some young man passing through, like I mattered. We ate, and the conversation flowed with ease. No forced politeness, no stilted formality. We spoke of life, of how things never unfold the way you imagine. She spoke of her younger years, how she missed the thrill of surprise, the excitement of not knowing what would happen next. And then she said something that stayed with me. She admitted how quiet the house had become with Liam always away, how the silence sometimes felt louder than voices. There was something raw in her voice, like this truth had been waiting a long time for someone to hear it. I didn't try to fix it. I had no answers. I just listened. But as I sat across from her, I noticed little things, how her eyes lit up when she was passionate about a memory, how her laugh wasn't rehearsed or graceful, just real. She wasn't Liam's mother anymore, not in that moment. She was a woman, with stories, with longings, with quiet courage. "Thank you for coming," she said softly once we'd cleared the wooden bowls. It's been some time since I've had an honest conversation. I wasn't sure what to say. So I nodded. But I could feel it, we both could. Something had shifted. As I stood to leave, she embraced me. It was brief, friendly, but her hand lingered just a heartbeat longer on my back, and that single moment kept echoing in my thoughts. "Take care, Russell," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. As I rode back into the night, my mind spun. The evening had been so ordinary, so simple, and yet it had shaken something loose inside me. I couldn't explain it. She hadn't crossed any line, hadn't said anything scandalous. But it was the way she saw me, like I was more than a shadow in someone else's story. It wasn't the same anymore. I'd been to her home 100 times, but this time, this was different, and I hated how much I thought about her in the days that followed. I tried to push it away, tried to tell myself it was nothing, a strange passing moment. Then a few days later, Liam summoned me to meet him at the local tavern. Figured it'd do me good to get out, get my thoughts straight. But the moment I stepped inside, I saw her Charlotte seated at the long oak counter with 2 other women from the village. She looked up, smiled, and gave a small wave. And before I knew what I was doing, I waved back. Her smile was soft, easy, but there was warmth in it, something unspoken. And I felt it like a pull in my gut. "Russell," she said as I approached, "didn't expect to see you here tonight." I shrugged, trying to keep my voice level. "Just meeting up with Liam. Didn't know you'd be out." She laughed lightly. Thought I'd see some old friends. Haven't had an evening like this in ages. And then her eyes lingered. Just a second too long. And that second said everything. And just like that, the tension returned. That quiet hum beneath the surface, low and persistent, like a drumbeat only we could hear. Always there. Always waiting. I should have stood and returned to Liam's side, raised a tankard, and talked nonsense like all was right in the world, but I didn't. Instead, I sat beside her. We spoke, we laughed, pretended like it was nothing, like the stillness between words didn't carry something heavier than it should. Soon enough, Liam joined us at the table unaware. The three of us spoke of our old schooling, of foolish dares and childhood mischief of a time when everything seemed simpler. But even as the stories danced, my thoughts kept drifting. And every time Lady Charlotte cast her gaze toward me, I felt it. That shift, that pull, that thing. Each glance, each soft smile from her stirred something inside me, something I couldn't name but felt in every breath. It was like we were keeping a secret from the world, even from ourselves, and neither of us was brave enough to name it. Then Liam rose to fetch more mead, leaving just the two of us again. I hadn't meant to speak, but the question tumbled out. "How have you truly been, Lady Charlotte?" She hesitated. The smile faded just slightly, and for the briefest heartbeat, her eyes looked tired, exposed. "I'm well enough," she said quietly. "Just a little lonely, perhaps." Her honesty caught me off guard. It was as if she'd lifted the veil for a moment and let me see the woman behind it. Not Liam's mother, not the lady of the house, just her. "I understand," I said barely above a whisper. "It gets hard sometimes." She nodded gently, and for a time we said nothing. But it wasn't the kind of silence that begged to be broken. It was soft, heavy, real. I wanted to say something else, to offer comfort, to lighten whatever burden weighed on her shoulders. But the words failed me. So I simply looked at her, wondering if she truly meant what she'd said, or if there was more beneath it. Then Liam returned, laughter in his voice and drinks in hand. And just like that, the moment passed. But not in my mind. Something inside me had changed. That night, the way I looked at Lady Charlotte was not the same. She wasn't just a noble matron or simply a friend's parent. There was something else now. Something I didn't yet understand and feared I might. Later, as we left the tavern beneath the lantern-lit sky, I walked beside Liam. He laughed and talked of nonsense, but my mind was elsewhere. Caught in that quiet confession. Caught in the weight of a glance. Caught in the question, was she truly just lonely? Or had she been asking for more? That night, as I lay on my cot back home, I couldn't let it go. The supper. The way she said my name. The way her hand lingered in that hug. The look in her eyes. This wasn't just some harmless evening out. Something else had begun. Something unspoken. And whether I liked it or not, I was already in it. The terrifying part, I wasn't sure I wanted out. Days passed, heavy and slow. I couldn't stop thinking about her, about that night at the tavern, about her voice, soft, uncertain, the way she'd looked at me like she was waiting for someone to truly see her. That weight clung to me like chainmail. I tried to tell myself it meant nothing, that it would pass. But I knew better. Liam and I still spent time together. He remained the same, bright, quick, with a joke, loyal as ever. But me, I kept slipping back into thoughts I had no business holding. Back to her. I hated myself for it, for how I noticed every movement she made, how I caught myself watching when I shouldn't. That next Saturday, I decided I needed clarity. I sent word to Liam and asked if he wanted to train in the yard like old times. Perhaps a little sweat and steel would clear my thoughts. When I arrived at the field behind the abbey, Liam was already there practicing footwork with a wooden blade. He grinned when he saw me. "About time," he said, tossing a practice sword my way. "Had a few things to settle," I said, forcing a grin. We trained for over an hour, fought hard, mocked each other like boys again. But my mind, it never left that quiet space behind her eyes. After a time, we dropped to the stone bench by the well, catching our breath. Then Liam turned to me, sweat clinging to his brow. "You think my mother's all right?" The question hit harder than I was ready for. "What do you mean?" I asked. "She's distant," he said, staring at the dust near his boots. "Not like herself." "I don't know. Maybe she's just tired." He shook his head. "No, it's more than that. I think she's going through something." His words rang in my chest, louder than they should have, because I knew I'd seen it, heard it, felt it, but I said nothing. Not yet. Not truly, Liam said at last, dragging his sleeve across his brow. Each time I try, she brushes me off. I don't want to press her, but I know she's not well. I didn't know what to say. A part of me itched to speak the truth, to tell him what I had seen in her eyes, what I had felt when she stood close, when the air between us trembled with unspoken things. But I didn't. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. Mayhap she simply needs some space, I offered, striving for a tone of ease. Aye, he muttered, though the heaviness in his voice told me he did not believe it. We finished our sparring and returned to his keep before nightfall, but all the while my heart beat like a war drum in my chest. I felt like a man walking straight into a storm he could neither outrun nor deny. We stepped inside, and there she was. Lady Charlotte seated on the low couch near the hearth, a folded journal in hand. She glanced up at us with a warm smile as though the world were perfectly in order. "Ah, you're both back," she said, her tone light. But I saw it, the weariness behind her eyes, the stiffness in her shoulders. She was wearing a mask, and I could see it now. "Evenin'," Mum Liam said, dropping into the cushions beside her. Well, I asked, doing my best to sound casual. She paused, eyes lingering on the firelight. "It's just been one of those long weeks," she said, finally, her voice calm, maybe too calm. I knew she was brushing it off. And I didn't call her on it, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know how. My heart pounded far louder than it should have, so I excused myself to the kitchen under the pretense of needing water. I needed to breathe, to find a moment of stillness, but as I reached for the pitcher, I heard footsteps behind me. Russell. I turned. She stood in the doorway, arms folded across her chest, voice soft but unwavering. Could I have a word? "Of course," I said, startled. She stepped further in and gently shut the door behind her. The space between us narrowed. I could feel the tension again, tight and warm in the air. She started, gaze cast low. "I wanted to thank you for the other evening. It meant more than I let on." Her words hit harder than I expected. I swallowed. "Of course," I said, "I'm here. Whenever you need to talk." She nodded, slow and deliberate. And then silence. But it wasn't empty. It hummed. Thick with everything we weren't saying, everything we couldn't. After a pause, she looked up and added, "Liam's a good lad. He's had his trials, but his heart's true." I nodded again, unsure where this was headed. Then her gaze lingered, longer than it should have, and there it was again, the flicker, that unspoken thing between us flaring like a candle in a still room. "Yeah," I said quietly. "He really is," she smiled, softly. But it wasn't just gratitude. There was something else layered beneath it. And I almost asked what we were doing, what this had become. But I didn't. I just stood there caught in the hush, not knowing which path to take. At last, she whispered, "Thank you again, Russell. Anytime," I said, though we both knew the words didn't mean the same thing anymore. A week passed. I couldn't shake the memory of that kitchen, the stillness, the weight of her eyes, the silence that carried far more than it should have. Every time I saw her after that, something in the air shifted, charged. I couldn't tell if she sensed it too, or if I was just reading into things that weren't there. But I felt it. Every glance and every brush of silence. Liam and I carried on as we always had. But each time she entered the room, my eyes followed her. The way her head tilted when she laughed. The way her gaze lingered when she didn't think anyone noticed. Then came Saturday. Liam had taken leave to drink with his comrades. I remained behind at their estate unexpectedly alone. I didn't mind. I needed the quiet, needed the silence to sort the weight in my chest. I was seated upon the same couch, flipping absently through a book of old ballads, when I heard her voice call softly down the hall. "Russell." I looked up. She stood there, still, watching me. "Hey," I said, trying to play it off, though my pulse had already quickened. She stepped into the room quiet and unsure for the first time in a long while. Can we talk? She asked. My throat tightened. Yeah, I said. Of course. She sat beside me, not touching, but barely apart. The air thickened. The walls felt closer. I've been thinking, she began, her voice hushed, about the things we've said, the silences between them. She paused, her hands folded in her lap, fingers gently twisting. I don't know what this is, she said, but I feel it. And I know you do too. Anne, she said suddenly, as if the name had been caught behind her lips too long. I feel as though I owe you an apology. Her words startled me. This was not the path I thought our talk would take. I've been distant, she admitted, voice low. There are matters I've been struggling with, and I did not wish to burden anyone else with them. I blinked, uncertain how to answer. You needn't apologize, I said at last. Truly, it's all right. She smiled faintly, but I could see in her eyes that she did not fully believe it. There's more, she said. I think I may have stepped over a line with you. My heart paused. This was the moment I had both feared and, if I'm honest, hoped for. What do you mean? I asked, softer now, more careful. She drew in a breath, her fingers tugging gently at the edge of her sleeve. Her gaze dropped to her lap. I think you already know, she said, nearly whispering. There's been something growing between us, and I cannot keep pretending it isn't there. Her words struck me square in the chest. I'd known. Of course I had. But to hear them spoken aloud made it feel real and dangerous. I'm not trying to make things strange, she continued, barely above breath. But I don't know how to live in this house and act as if nothing's changed. I feel it every time you're near. I looked at her then, at the curve of her jaw, the faint quiver in her lips. My thoughts raced. I knew the peril. I knew the betrayal this might become. And yet, I could not deny what stirred in me. I don't want it to be awkward, I said, though my voice betrayed my unease, but I don't know what you expect me to say. She met my gaze, then, steady, sure. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us thickened like storm clouds before a downpour. And then her hand brushed mine. Barely a touch, but it was like fire on skin. A jolt straight through my spine. This isn't some idle fancy rustle, she whispered, her eyes never leaving mine. I don't know what this is exactly, but I can't ignore it anymore. My breath caught. I felt guilt and longing and fear. But more than all of it, I felt something real. Are you sure? I asked. About this? She nodded this time, wrapping her fingers around mine, firm, certain. I'm sure. And with that, the line we danced along for weeks vanished. We didn't speak more of it that night. We didn't need to. But everything was different now. The air between us wasn't filled with questions, it was filled with understanding. And there was no turning back. A year has passed since that night, a year of whispers in the corridors and stolen moments behind closed doors. A year of living in the in-between between what we were and what we couldn't admit to being. We never spoke much of us. Not in words, but we didn't need to. What began with a glance, a touch, a long silence, had grown into something constant, something quiet and powerful, like a candle burning in a chapel, hidden from the world, but steady, always steady. It felt strangely like the most natural thing in the world, but we both knew it was fragile. It had to be kept secret. From the start, we agreed on one truth: our peace mattered, and that peace came from trust, a trust built in small, deliberate steps, in rooms where no one watched, in evenings when Liam was away and the only light was the fire's flicker and the sound of shared breath. We carved out a world for ourselves, a world no one else could enter. But the guilt never left me entirely. Each time Liam laughed beside me, I felt the sting. Not because he knew he didn't, but because secrets that deep always leave scars on the soul. Still, I never questioned the choice. We chose this, and even in its mess and quiet heartache, it always felt true. We didn't see each other too often. We never pressed, never rushed. When Liam came home, we kept our distance. We spoke like old friends, nothing more. We were careful. But the glances, the fleeting smiles, the brush of fingers across a tabletop, those were the moments that held everything. Sometimes, in the stillness of her home, we'd wonder what might come if truth ever found its way to light. But we had no answer, only a shared silence. And the knowledge that for now what we had, however secret, however strange, was ours. Ours alone. Yet for all the possibilities we'd once whispered of, we did not dwell upon them. Nay, we stayed in the present, the quiet spaces between moments where no judgment could reach us and no soul need ever understand. Where we could simply be. It was a still evening, the kind that wrapped the manor in silence. Nearly a year had passed since our hidden bond had taken root. I sat again, in the solar, upon the same cushioned bench where it all began. The chamber looked unchanged, hearth warm with firelight, the tall window spilling dusk onto the floor, but everything between us was different now, familiar, lived in. Liam had ridden off with friends from the village that afternoon, leaving the house to us once more, and in that quiet with no steps echoing in the halls, no eyes to watch us, we had peace. We had grown skilled in this rhythm, measured, watchful, tender. Our words were fewer now, our silences more meaningful. What once felt perilous now felt ordinary, unorthodox, yes. But mine, ours. Charlotte sat beside me, her presence as steady as the fire behind us. The years had not dulled her. No, they had carved something softer into her. Graceful fatigue, earnest warmth. It had taken time to learn how to bear the burden of secrecy. But we had learned. We had folded it into the fabric of our lives like a well-worn cloak. And somewhere along the way, the cloak became comfort. "Do you ever wonder how we arrived at this?" she asked, her voice low and laced with distant wonder. I leaned back into the wooden bench, letting the question rest between us like smoke. "Every day," I said truthfully. "Even now I struggle to believe we've lasted this long." She gave a quiet laugh and laid her head on my shoulder. The weight of it stilled me. "It doesn't feel like a year," she murmured. "No," I said. "It feels like it was always meant." Her fingers brushed mine. I let them linger. "It's strange," I said, "but the kind of strange that makes you grateful you never walked the safe path." She turned eyes, meeting mine with that look, the one that always silenced the rest of the world. "I wouldn't undo it," she whispered. "Not a single thing. We did well. We kept it ours. And that's what made it real." Her words sank deep. They were not poetic. They were not grand. But they were ours. "It is ours," I echoed, squeezing her hand gently, "and I'm happy." "Aye," she breathed. "We are." After that we spoke little. There was no need. We sat there, two souls, cloaked in stillness, hearts exposed only to each other. The only sound was the ticking of the mantel clock and the distant rustle of trees beyond the shutters. 1 year. 1 whole year of hiding our truth in plain sight. And we had survived it. More than that, we had made it something worth keeping. We had guarded the flame, and though small, it had never once gone out. As darkness fell and the candlelight gilded her face in gold, I realized something simple and profound. This quiet, flawed, tender thing was enough. It would never be perfect. But it was ours. And for now, in a world of castles and secrets of duties and masks, that was all I could ever ask.